Hi there from Chicago. Mike Hall here. Glad to have you with us for the next hour. This is Big Ten Today, presented by Gatorade. We are thrilled to have you with us. A ton to get to. As I mentioned, a deep discussion coming up on soccer in just a little bit. But we've got football for you, and for that, we're glad to say, get into my lobby to Yogi Roth. Yogi, I know you want football. You did want to say you watched some basketball yesterday as well, yes?
Sure did. Love watching some hoops on Big Ten Network. Guy Haberman, he went right back to work after our football game, so that was fun. But this is fun. I mean, we haven't hung out in a while, right? We did media days together a long time ago,
Yep.
but I still remember fondly you sitting in my living room post Rose Bowl almost a decade ago. So today I am stoked to be with you, Mike.
That's right, which means if you had the Rose Bowl and media days, that's 2 times we've hung out in a decade, which I think is pretty good for you and me. Hey, let's get to our big story on this show, and that is what's happening later on this evening. It is the college football playoff rankings. And forget what Joe Cocker said. Do not leave your hat on. The committee for the college football playoff has been meeting to release their first rankings. They come out tonight. They symbolically, publicly are leaving their personal opinions on that hat rack before they enter the room and make their announcements. And remember, the committee does their own rankings. They do not concern themselves with what the AP voters think. However, to give you a general idea of perhaps where teams might fall this evening, here's the latest AP rankings. 2 Big Ten teams at the very top, Oregon not far behind, then teams like Michigan, Washington, Iowa not far off as well, receiving votes. Don't be stunned if the Hawkeyes creep in to that top 25 this evening. Here's another way to look at it, what the bracket would be. Again, there's a change this year. The top 4 seeds, which earn a bye, is just the top 4 seeds. Does not matter conference affiliation. So it could be, as it shows here, 2 Big Ten teams already in the quarterfinals, 2 SEC teams already in the quarterfinals. Yogi, the rankings come out tonight, as I mentioned. What is it you want to talk about the process in general that people need to know about at home?
Well, it's fascinating. Let's just start with that, right? Second year, as you referenced, with the expanded playoff. And this is a new committee, right? There's new members on this year's committee. There's a new chair on this year's committee. So I don't really know how they process it. And there's even a new rule in terms of how they're evaluating your strength of schedule, making sure they prioritize a quality win or a quality loss versus playing a team like the Citadel, for instance, no offense, in week 11. So I just say all that like it's important to set the table. The next thing that happens at every respective conference, they meet with 2 members of the committee last week, so the week prior to the voting, and they present their case. So for instance, in the Big Ten, I'm sure the commissioner and other members of his staff will present to 2 members of the committee. They'll take that on top of all the data they received and then present that to the entire room over the weekend and say, okay, this is the case for said teams that should be in the CFP, said teams that should be in consideration for the top 25. So there's a lot of information that goes into it. There's also the purview from every respective league. What we don't know, we have no idea really, is how they receive it this year. Like, how do they value quality wins? How do they value week 1 wins or week 1 losses? Like, I'm so curious to see, where does Alabama sit? They lose against Florida State in week 1. They don't look good. On the contrary, Ohio State looks awesome against the Texas team that then struggled and now is back after some success with some tight games where they didn't look absolutely dominant like everybody thought they would this season. So I just want to see if there's some consistencies. We won't know it until the second rankings reveal themselves, but I think it's important to note how this thing shakes out, because ultimately you're really deciding 7 spots when you think about it. You have the 4 top seeds, as you reference, but you have 5 conference champions. They're going to get an automatic bid. So how do they net out with the rest of the teams that eventually get selected, I think will be fascinating entering tonight. And then I think to your point, when we saw those the poll there, where does Iowa sit? I mean, Iowa's looked awesome. They played Indiana as well as anybody, you could argue, right? On the contrary, or I say conversely, Washington, look at how well they played, right? Whether it was at Ohio State, they played them as well as anybody. They have a tough loss on the road with 3 interceptions against Michigan. So where do they value them? Where do they value Michigan? How do they value SC, who put it all over Michigan physically at the line of scrimmage, but lost the line of scrimmage to Notre Dame? So I'm curious on the comparison from team to team.
Well, and I always like reminding people at the beginning, there are going to be 6 of these playoff ranking reveals. None of them matter until the last one. Okay, so just keep in mind, whatever happens today, there's still a ton of football to be played. And the whole point is these committee members are supposed to be flexible. You brought up a great point of Texas, right? You think they're elite and amazing early on. Then after a few games, you're going, oh, they're not that good. Now you think they are good again. Like, that's okay to be fluid, to think that a win against a certain team is great now, but 3 weeks later to go, oh, actually, we have more data and we understand it might not be as good. So we'll see there's going to be some flexibility throughout these rankings. But it does seem pretty clear the top two teams are going to be Ohio State and Indiana. But Yogi, are you sure it's going to be in that order?
No, I don't know, and I think that's like if we're just going to be try to be unemotional, right? Just try to play the play with it is like we'll just lean into every coaching cliche that we hear every weekend. But I think there's some truth to it because we have no idea. When you look at Ohio State, to me, here's a team who obviously went on a run last year, finished the season #1, started the season they weren't at the top of the polls, but they've looked the part. I think for all of us in sport, we'd be like, hey, they've just kind of carried that banner. That is hard to do when you know what the standard is as a defending champ. And then I go to Indiana. I think you could argue they have the best win of the season. I mean, I think it's a good conversation going to Autzen or Alabama going to Georgia and getting a win. Those are the two best wins in all of college football. It's a better win than Ohio State at home against Texas, Ohio State going to Washington. So I'm really curious to see where the committee nets out on this thing. There's always a debate, and especially with, I think, media members and definitely with fans of if I change your logo, where would you sit?
Right.
So if Indiana had an Ohio State logo and got a win out at Autzen, we wouldn't even talk about it. It'd be a no-brainer. They'd be #1. So why not now? Right. So I'm really curious to see what the committee nets out in that regard. Same thing for Texas A&M. They're the other undefeated team. They'll probably sit #3. They beat Notre Dame. We're going to see how Notre Dame is valued. Remember, Notre Dame lost a tight game to Miami. Miami has since gone on a challenging stretch, losing 2 games. But where do they value Notre Dame? Because that's going to affect the USC side of this thing. So I think to your earlier point, yes, it's different when it's all said and done. But I think anyone on the committee would say they want to be consistent. And I've asked this to members of the committee over the years. I've asked it to people who've been in the college football playoff system over the years. The following question. Is it call it the 4 best back in the day or the 12 best now, or is it the best bodies of work? And I just think that's the debate. And as I project out, and again, I go to the end of the season, I mean, think about some of these schedules late in the season within this league and think about some of the schedules late in the season in the SEC. I mean, you just can't argue as I'm looking at some of these schedules. Like, it's just not even close when you think of who has who late in the season. SC's got to go to Autzen, then play their rival. They got Iowa at home in 2 weeks. I mean, it's a challenging run. I mean, again, they're not going to play an FCS opponent in week 11. So again, is it by spot? Is it body of work? Is it best today? And that's where I think like the week 1 game will tell a lot. Like where Alabama and Ohio State sit to me is going to tell a lot about where the committee is thinking. I know what they'll say. They'll say it's just about today. But today, to me, has to take into consideration the entirety of the season.
Right. And as I always say, it had better be about your body of work, because what are we doing? If the games don't matter,
what are we doing?
That's
Thank
ridiculous.
you.
It has to be something you can actually prove. Here's why we picked this team, not just, I say they're better on a mythical, field of a hypothetical matchup. But we seem pretty confident that Ohio State and Indiana are going to be 1 and 2 in some order. Oregon seems obviously pretty clearly the next team. Where do you expect them to fall in these rankings?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think they'll be in the top 6 for sure. I think they're in consideration for a top 4 team in terms of a top 4 seed if it all ended today. A lot has to shake out in that regard. I think they're worthy of that. But you have to take into your point the entirety of the body of work, and they've got a huge opportunity with the rest of their slate. I look at, obviously, Iowa being a critical game. They get a Minnesota team that's scary, SC, and then the rivalry on the road against Washington. So they'll have all the opportunities in the world to make their case to get a bye if things play out and Ohio State and Indiana remain unscathed and those two meet each other in the Big Ten title game. But that's going to be the argument. And then who wins that game will, of course, impact who gets the byes and what happens in other conferences. But I think there's a ton of intrigue about them going into Kinnick. We've heard so much about it. That's where dreams go to die, as you've said many times. We'll see if their dream does, or if Dan Lanning does what he's always done since they've been in the Big Ten, right? Go to Michigan and wave to the crowd goodbye, right? Go into Wisconsin and jump around in between the 3rd and 4th quarter. Like, how will they navigate will be a huge test for them because they haven't looked as dominant right? And since that Indiana game, which partly of that is the weather and crazy rainstorm last time they played against Wisconsin and Austin, but it's a data point. So I think for Oregon, they'll probably be outside of that top 4. I imagine they'll sit somewhere around 6. But for them, like they've got a brutal path, man. I mean, I think that is the thing where between now and the end of the final rankings in early December, so much can change because of just the strength of the schedule. And that's why I go back and I'll just to be very clear, the metric is rewarding teams defeating high quality opponents while minimizing the penalty to losing to such teams. So that'll be really unique, especially when we get into the 2-loss conversation among teams in the Big Ten because the conference is so strong.
To me, Yogi, the most interesting thing that will be revealed tonight is who the committee sees as that 4th Big Ten team behind Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon. And specifically to me, I'm curious if you disagree, I think it's either going to be Michigan or USC, but I can't tell which one because their resumes are remarkably similar. They both have 2 losses, both to good teams, both on the road. They both have 2 wins against bowl-eligible teams. They both have a big hurdle still remaining at the end of this season. They're pretty similar.
Yeah, I think we're going to learn a lot, to your point of how do they value head-to-head? Point blank. I mean, I just look at SC and what they did on the road, and I get it. They didn't look great, and Dylan Raiola gets hurt at Nebraska, but they've struggled on the road, as you know, since they've entered Big Ten play. This league is brutal on the road, especially for some of these West Coast teams. Just look at the numbers around that. So I think SC should be higher than Michigan because they drilled them when they played them. They won the line of scrimmage, right? And since then, they haven't necessarily dominated the line of scrimmage. So, again, we'll see. Is it body of work or as of Saturday night when all of the games ended? I don't think Michigan looked great either against Purdue. I mean, they almost got upset at home. So I think SC will be higher than them. And then I look at Iowa. To me, that's the outlier in this thing. Ever since they lost to Iowa State in week 2, they've kind of been a sleeper, right? I get it. The game against Indiana was the one that caught a bunch of people's eyes. But when you look at their best wins, they don't necessarily have one of those. Penn State, who we know they're struggling this year. Minnesota, they dominated that team for a team that was bowl eligible. That's probably their best win of the season. That's why this weekend's going to be so critical. So I'd be curious to see where they put Iowa to put them in striking distance. Because I think Iowa could be, when this thing's all said and done, we said it last week on this show too, in a vacuum, you look at Iowa's games, you're like, yeah, I could see them taking Oregon at home. Yeah, I could see him going to SC and winning the line of scrimmage. Yeah, I could see him Michigan State. I could see him at Nebraska winning that game, especially now with Dylan Raiola injured and here comes TJ Lateef. But it's a hard stretch to go do in this league, as we know. And I think their offense has steadily been progressing. I get the numbers aren't elite, but watching Mark Gronowski last time out, he looked the most confident in this offense led by offensive coordinator Tim Lester. So I can't wait to see where they net out with Iowa because they're not in the AP top 25. But we give more credit. And I'm not a pessimist around the CFP committee. I think that is not the way to go. These are the people that the sport believes are the best suited to evaluate the teams in this sport. So let's give them the credit in that regard. If so, I think Iowa's going to be in that top 25, just like I think Washington is. Washington is a fascinating story as well. We got their game this weekend on Big Ten Network at Wisconsin, UW, which is kind of fun. Purdue at UCLA, and then Oregon. Think about that. If they run the table and beat an Oregon team, assuming Oregon runs the table, 2-loss team, do they get in? Well, then you have a debate. Does Michigan beat Ohio State? If they are as a 2-loss team, there's a head-to-head. So to me, I am taking track of data points. Do they value head-to-head today? USC Michigan's a great example. Will they value head-to-head after the regular season? That could be Michigan and Washington. I don't know. Maybe Washington plays lights out. Maybe Michigan squeaks by in a 13-12 win over Ohio State. I don't know how it's going to shake out. But the point is, I think there's really powerful data points that we can glean from tonight. And that is where you can hold the committee's feet to the proverbial fire of hey, please have consistency. That's all we beg week to week. If you're going to value head-to-head, cool. If it's all about the best at the end of the season, fine. But to your point, what are we doing every week? I just want some of that, and I don't think we have it. So you kind of lean towards the coaches. Mack Rhodes is the new chair. You look at some of the coaches, as you know, Chris Alt, Mark D'Antonio, and Mike Riley, 2 coaches that have been in the Big Ten. I think when it comes down to it at the end of the day, I just believe this from my gut, is that the committee leans on the people that have put the headsets on.
Well, and if you're a fan of Iowa or Washington and you're ranked lower than you'd like to be, or maybe even not ranked potentially, just be patient. Like Yogi's saying, you start winning more games, all of a sudden 10-2 looks a lot different than 6-2. For sure. Yogi was mentioning games coming up on our air. Here's a good one. Ohio State, #1 in the country. They play against Purdue this week. And remember, the Boilers have a history of beating highly ranked Buckeyes. In 2018, the Buckeyes were #2 in the land and lost to Purdue. 9 years before that, the Buckeyes were #7 in the land and lost to the Boilermakers. That matchup comes up your way. Your big stat, presented by Gatorade, looks at the Heisman resumes of 3 guys we expect to be near the top of most people's list. Julian Sayin of OSU, Fernando Mendoza of IU, and Oregon's Dante Moore, all having very impressive seasons. And we're going to break down why they're so impressive individually in just a second. OSU already has a hashtag for their QB, hashtag #WeSayin Heisman. For what it's worth, Brock Vereen on the Big Ten Network created a Mendoza hashtag a few weeks ago of hashtag HeisMendoza. But still, neither of those are reasons why someone is going to win. We bring back Yogi Roth to talk about this. When you put your vote forward for who wins the Heisman, what are the criteria you look at?
Well, it's detailed. And I just say that I get to meet a lot of these quarterbacks because it's a pseudo quarterback award when they're in high school, right? All 3 of those quarterbacks you reference, I've known them for a long time, not just calling their games, but knowing them when they're 16, 17 years old and trying to make their dreams into reality. And now to see them on this stage, I think in the Heisman conversation, it can become a narrative popularity contest. And I don't think that's appropriate to the award. You know, over 700 people have a vote, which is wild when you think about that, when you look at the regionality around that thing. So I think it's everybody's job to do a lot of the diligence around it. So I went to work, created a 10-point scale around how I evaluate the Heisman. #1, it's competitive dominance. Like, can you be consistently competitively dominant? That's the first one. 2 is, who do you play? Power 4 filter. Like, I'm not into 8 conference games. You're only play 8 conference games. Like, you have to ball out. And I love all the QBs in the SEC, but it's just a factor when you look, especially Big Ten versus that league and what happens at the end of the season, as I referenced earlier. 3rd, I go to like what I pay. Would I like take my kids to go watch them play? And for those 3 quarterbacks you referenced, 100% I would. 4th, can you process? I always say at quarterback, you can play catcher, you can play quarterback. I'm going to vote for somebody who I think can really manipulate defenses with their eyes, with their mind. Can they really process? And that's something that I think will allow them to have success moving on to the next level. 5th is the it factor. And I think every dominant athlete walks into a room and their presence is felt. The question is, do you make everybody better? So that's how I define that. Those 3 individuals have that in spades. I think the injury factor is a big element to this. Like, what happened to your left tackle? What happened to your lead wide receiver? I think you just have to know those things. Did you win your conference? I value winning a championship. I think there's a stat when you look at the NFL draft and quarterbacks drafted, less than 10% didn't have a winning record when they were in high school. I mean, you just have to be a winner. And I think in college, when you look at those 3 players right there, all 3 of those teams still have a chance to win the Big Ten Conference. I go to analytics. I think it's a big part of the sport, so it's a part of my process. And then I go to the integrity piece of this. This isn't just the MVP in college football. Like, what do you do for your community? What are your community service hours logged? How are you impacting your community? Are you bigger than just the talent that you have? How are you making sure that you're carrying on the jersey and the name on the front of that jersey with yourself? Because you win this thing, and I've been around a lot of players that have, it changes your life, and it's going to impact all of those lives who you get to touch, and football is so amazing with that. And then the last one is performance on big stages. Big stages. I just think that is a part of it. We hear about Heisman moments all the time. I think it's weighted way too much. I saw it. I think of Carson Palmer back at SC. They beat Notre Dame back in 2002, 2003, and that was his moment. But he had a heck of a season when you watch it. Guys always have a moment. I want to see moments. That's why I think this league is amazing. When you look at playing non-conference games, playing in a conference championship game that could be a preview of a national championship or a semifinal game, how do you operate in those big-time environments? So I look at all those 10 points, and then I grade them on 1 to 10. And then I start just putting the numbers up. And I'll do that with those 3 players. I'll do that with Jeremiah Smith because I think he's worthy of the conversation as well. We'll see if Damon Williams goes off in the last month of the season. Like, I think there's a bunch of players that are noteworthy for this. Ty Simpson at Alabama, he's clearly in the conversation. But I think that's the responsibility of a voter. And if you're just going to roll in on the final weekend of the season and vote, I think you're lazy. And I think what I don't like about the Heisman, I don't know if you know this, Mike, but they give you your ballot a week before the championship games are played. And I just think that is should be subject to change is probably the best way I could say that, because there's still a game to play. And as I just referenced, you got a big stage, you have a huge opportunity. I think that should be evaluated. And you could even argue, should we have the Heisman after the season? Because there's an entirely different season after the regular season. But neither here nor there. I saw Ryan Day say that earlier this week.
No, I agree. If you're going to count the conference title games, why would you not count the playoffs? Or if you just want it to be a regular season award, fine, then voting has to be in before the conference title games. But the inconsistency seems a little weird there. I think you said something that everyone understands, that idea of a Heisman moment. Julian Sayin has been so good for Ohio State. He's been so consistent. But if I'm a Buckeye fan hoping he wins it, I might be a little worried because they might not have Heisman moments left for him. Their schedule is Purdue, UCLA, Rutgers, and then the one where there's going to be a ton of eyeballs, of course, is the game against Michigan. But overall, make the case for Sayin right now.
Well, you just watch him play, and I just think Ryan Day, I know it's so hard to give out Coach of the Year awards, but what they have done, and I get all the talent they have, but how they've managed that position, that room. Go back to the spring, and it's a competition. Training camp, it's a competition. And you saw them manage the psyche of that room, and I think that's such a big part of this. And then you go to the Texas game, and they watched him manage it. When they needed him to make a play on a third down, they did, but they didn't start the game that way. Same thing when they went on the road at Washington. Early on in the game, they're trying to control the clock. There's some turnovers, some freaky things on special teams. I just think we've seen him as the year goes on, went from first gear to second to third to fourth. Now he's fully in fifth gear, and he's rolling. Look no further than the most recent game. And just the downfield shots, the aggressive nature, I just think it's been impressive. I mean, he has been outstanding. You go to the definition of the award, outstanding college football player whose performance epitomizes great ability combined with diligence, perseverance, and hard work. And we've seen that. It's so impressive to watch him. He's squarely in the mix. He clearly has one of the best teams in the country, so that is part of it. But you still got to make those throws. I get it. Everybody doesn't have those, monster wideouts on the outside and that offensive front or that defense. But that's the reality, and he's thriving in it, man. So big fan of him, and I think he's got every opportunity to go do that. And you're right. He'll have the biggest stage in the country that final weekend on the road against Michigan.
Yeah, I agree. Even though he's got elite wide receivers, he's still got to put the ball in the right place. And 80% completion percentage is just silly at this level. One of the more interesting stats to me to follow involves Indiana and Fernando Mendoza, who's looked marvelous all year. So the all-time record for Indiana touchdown passes in a single season was set last year by Curtis Rourke with 29. Yogi, Mendoza's got 25 already right now.
Yeah, well, I think what's so impressive about Fernando Mendoza's Heisman resume is that his team is leading the conference in rushing. They're dominating time of possession, and here he is doing it with his legs and with his arm. I have an acronym that I love in college football, especially quarterback, called PACE, plays after critical errors. Go back and watch him after an incompletion, if you want to call that a critical error because the bar is so high, or a turnover like we saw last week. He doesn't flinch. I've known Fernando for a long time. You go back to his story. He's a two-star recruit coming out of South Florida on his way to the Ivy League, gets a chance to come out to Cal, sits for a couple years, then he plays, and he just took over the team. Since he's gotten Indiana, you could argue he's taken over the league. And the way that he has played, the ball location, the discernment, the growth within a system. And I think that's just, to me, unnoticed. I mean, he hasn't been in the system for a full calendar year. Talking about a Heisman candidate. Are you a Heisman frontrunner? I mean, Julian at least sat in the system for a year. I get it was Chip Kelly calling the plays. This is Ryan Day's offensive system. I just think that needs to be noted. And I just think for Ohio State, there's a world where, this is what we do. For Indiana, they've been rewriting, to your point, Curtis Rourke, Fernando, they've been rewriting the record books. And so the story you fall in love with, but the film you also equally fall in love with. He's going to be at the top of everybody's NFL draft boards heading into the spring and the NFL draft. And I just don't think you can argue how he's played, which would be so fun. I go to the point 10 of my criteria. They play Ohio State. Those guys won't be on the field at the same time, but they will be evaluated at the same time. It will be a huge opportunity, and that'll be one of those moments that hopefully voters withstand the urge to vote early based on those two.
Yeah, if they're 1 and 2 in the country, Indiana, Ohio State playing in the Big Ten title game, that feels like it could be a winner gets the Heisman game for sure. You mentioned Oregon's Dante Moore. His only bad game this year, really, or subpar, was against Indiana. Every other game, he's been really good. I haven't heard much of his name around the Heisman discussion yet. Why is he on your radar?
Well, number one, I think he's playing at a ridiculous level. I do think his arm talent is, you could argue, as unique as anybody in America's. Right? Julian, special. Fernando, we just talked about it. I think Dante Moore's arm talent is just very, very, very unique. Every quarterback, I think, needs to have a unique trait. I think that is Dante Moore's. I've seen it since he was in high school, saw it at UCLA, saw it in spring, saw it in training camp. He wasn't even named the starting quarterback, but you could just tell he was really special. Really dominant early into the season. I get the game you're talking about was Indiana. They struggled. And then he gets hurt in the game against Wisconsin in driving rainstorm. And in some worlds, you could fall off of this Heisman conversation. But just look no further than the grid that you have on the schedule. And you look at who Oregon has. They're going to Kinnick, where, again, dreams go to die. Fernando Mendoza and this Indiana offense did not play well, if we're going to comp those two. They struggled against one of the more dominant defenses in America. What does Oregon do? They get a Friday night stage. The whole country will be tuned in on Friday night to watch them play Minnesota. Then they get the Trojans. If the Trojans are winning and SC Oregon plays, this nationally will be one of the more critical games in the country. And in recruiting on the West Coast, it'll be one of the most critical games in recent years because SC would be, quote unquote, back. I mean, if SC can go get a win against Iowa in 2 weeks, look out. I mean, the hype train out here in LA will be much like it was after they put it on Michigan. And then they go to UW on the road. So I just think the opportunities for him on big stages are greater than the other two quarterbacks. And it's not really even close. So if he can finish strong, then it'll be a fun debate of like him sitting at home watching the Big Ten title game, maybe a preview of the national title game, and you've got 3 quarterbacks all in their first year as a starter, which to me is really fascinating within their respective school. And I just think it's a cool thing. Like, we don't see that often when you're talking about 3 potential finalists for the Heisman.
Yeah, and it'll be fun in November to see what other names creep in there. If it is Moore, if it is Jeremiah Smith, as you mentioned, could Elijah Surratt creep in there? Could Justice Haynes stay 1 or 2 in the country in rushing yards and make a case for it? We'll find out in just a little bit. We're going to take Thursday, don't miss the 2025 Big Ten Women's Soccer Tournament semifinals presented by Allstate. Washington faces Wisconsin, then UCLA against Michigan State. Live coverage begins 4 Eastern, 3 Central, 1 Pacific on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. And the lady calling the action is Kylan Mills, who is joining us here to, again, bring stability and professionalism to a show that is desperately needing it. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, someone has to do it. All right, Mike, it's a difficult job. I have put the show on my back, but hey, the chance to talk soccer is a great opportunity, and we've got such a great tournament ahead. I'm so excited.
And we got a whole segment just for you to do that. So let's start off with those semifinals. You got Washington and Wisconsin, both teams no strangers to being in the semis of this tournament.
Yeah, both teams that have been really good in their respective conferences. Of course, Washington in just their second year in the Big Ten, but they made it to the semifinals last year in their inaugural year. Now, Wisconsin and Washington met just a couple weeks ago. They played to a 1-0 decision. Washington got the win. They actually locked up the Big Ten regular season title in that game. The interesting thing is these two teams have a lot of similarities in the way that they play. They both like to press, which means they apply a lot of pressure when they don't have the ball. They sit very high up the field. They also have a lot of threats in behind when they do get the ball, meaning they have a ton of speed up top. I expect this to be a really physical, really gritty battle, which is exactly what we saw when they met a couple weeks back. And these are two coaches who are elite. Head coach Nicole Van Dyke, kudos to her for the identity that she has built with this Huskies program, both on and off the pitch, the culture, the buy-in, it's there. And then Paula Wilkins, one of the OGs in the Big Ten for both Penn State and Wisconsin, running the table. I'm really looking forward to that matchup.
It's weird, too. The 1 seed does not do well in this tournament historically. 2016 was the last time that the 1 seed ended up winning. The other semi is Michigan State taking on the defending champs, the Bruins.
Yeah, the Bruins looking to do something that has rarely been done in Big Ten women's soccer tournament history, but if they're going to do it, head coach Marguerite Awazasa would be the person to lead the charge. This is a Bruins team that lost a lot of talent from last year. 6 players moving on to the National Women's Soccer League to play professionally. Those are big shoes to fill. They stumbled a little bit early on in the season. They had a really tough non-conference schedule, but this is a group that is so technically talented, really good in possession, and then really well-structured defensively. On the other hand, Michigan State, also really well structured defensively, good in possession, but they've got a lot of threats up top where they can be really good in transition. Forward Kennedy Bell having an outstanding year, leading the Big Ten in goals scored, transferring in from Maryland, has really found her place. Head coach Jeff Hausler, another coach I want to shout out for building an incredible identity with this Michigan State program. They are now perennially really contenders to be in the national title conversation, top 10 ranked in the country. That matchup, I think, could decide who ends up winning the Big Ten tournament because, as you mentioned, the top seed typically does not win. Also of note, Washington and Michigan State did not play in the regular season. So if we were to see that in the tournament, that would be the first time those two teams met. So it could go either way.
And MSU-UCLA did. It was a draw back in September,
1-1.
adding to the drama of this matchup. You mentioned it hasn't happened in a long time. 2001.
Yep.
The last time. That was when Penn State won the tournament in back-to-back years. Over to the men, final week of the regular season coming our way. Two teams can still win the regular season title. One is Maryland. Pretty simply, all they got to do is beat Michigan State, and the regular season title's theirs.
That's the exact position that you want to be in for any competitive program. Win and you're in. It sounds so simple, but if there's any team that can do it, it's a team led by head coach Sasho Sorovki. One of the best coaches in the country, has led the Terps to a national championship, looking to bring the team back to that type of notoriety. Number 2 in the country right now. They have a ton of experience, really good defensively. Only 9 goals conceded this season. They've got a great goalkeeper in Lauren Mack, and then again, they return a majority of their starters, which is unusual in this day and age with the transfer portal. So this is a team that has a ton of experience and confidence in the system they're in. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Terps end up winning the regular season. However, Washington under head coach Jamie Clark has had an outstanding year. Little bit of a surprise for some folks. They are typically a good team. They weren't maybe necessarily expected to be a great team. They've come out on the opposite side of Maryland and had one of the best attacks in the country. Charlie Kosakoff, one of the players leading the charge up top, who brought in a ton of experience from last year. Washington has a chance if they win. So this is one that I also feel like could go either way. However, I have a hard time betting against the Terps, but that game against Michigan State's one to circle. It all comes down to Friday night. That's the regular season finale. Everyone is playing except for one team in the conference.
And you led to one of the games, Washington-UCLA. Can you give like a big picture of why this game matters for multiple reasons?
Yeah, it does matter for multiple reasons because of one important note. The Big Ten men's soccer tournament is only 4 teams this year. It was 7 last year. And right now, UCLA sits in 4th, so they're the last team making it in. They need to get a result. Rutgers and Indiana play. Those are the teams in 5th and 6th. If one of those teams gets a win, UCLA loses, they would surpass UCLA, so the Bruins would be knocked out of Big Ten tournament contention. So everything is on the line for both Washington and UCLA in this matchup. Really looking forward to that one. And then how about the fact that Rutgers and Indiana, yes, that's right, the Hoosiers, could not make the Big Ten tournament. That's just how competitive this conference is. Those are 2 teams that have been ranked in the top 25 in the last month, possibly not making the Big Ten tournament, and they meet on Friday. What better environment to look forward to in Bloomington, one of the toughest places to play in the country. You know that band and those fans are going to bring it.
It's rare that a sports tournament of any size downsizes, right? I mean, it's very interesting you do that because, like you said, some of these big brands are now not going to make it, which puts even more pressure on this final week.
Yeah, there's so much pressure on the regular season, which you could look at as a positive. It makes the regular season more intense, but then you also lose a little bit of the opportunities for some of those upsets that you see. For example, an Indiana team has gone in seeded 6th in the Big Ten tournament and made a run to the title game because you know they're a team that's going to show up in October under head coach Todd Yeagley. So, like I said, I think there's 2 sides of the coin here in terms of it adding some pressure to the regular season, which is what you want. You want those games to matter. However, on the other side, you do lose a little bit of the opportunity for some of those lower seeds to possibly make runs, especially with the quality that we have in Big Ten men's soccer. Expect to see a multitude of teams moving on to the NCAA tournament, which then is also an interesting challenge because you don't play maybe a couple weeks if you don't play in the Big Ten tournament, then you could potentially still be going and playing in the big dance. So you got to stay fresh and stay ready during that time.
Women's semifinals Thursday here on the Big Ten Network. Kylan Mills will be calling the action.
Woo, looking forward to it. Yeah, good to see you too. Where's the ball, though? I thought that we were going to do a dribbling segment after this.
Oh, they say we got to go. Yeah, they say, yeah, it's very urgent we go so you don't see my athletic skills.
Miss the message, yeah.
With a soccer. Saturday Big Ten Tailgate is live from Iowa for 2 hours to get you ready for the showdown between the Hawkeyes and Ducks. Then countdown to kickoff takes you on the field before the Buckeyes clash with the Boilermakers. It all starts Saturday, special time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, 9:30 Central, 7:30 Pacific. Nebraska losing a close one to USC last week was tough, but losing their starting QB for the rest of the season was tougher. Dylan Raiola hurt his leg Saturday and is out for the remainder of the year. The sophomore has started every game last year and this year. He ends the season top 10 in the country in pass efficiency and leaves behind a team with a 6-3 record. We bring back Yogi Roth now. Yogi, where do the Huskers turn at QB now?
Well, I think first, let's just talk about Dylan Raiola for a second. Horrible news, to your point. I also think there's a world when you're a premier recruit that this is a pseudo blessing in disguise. So what do I mean by that? Since Dylan was like 14 years old, he was a huge recruit, right? His dad, of course, was a dominant player in college in the National Football League. So he's been in the spotlight for, you could argue, the entirety of his football life. Especially you go to Nebraska with that fan base. I mean, it's a massive deal, as you referenced, started every single game there. Now he gets to take a beat, get better, and also see the game from a different lens. And I think taking a breath sometimes is something amazing for quarterbacks that are high-profile recruits. So I'm looking forward to talking to him like in the spring next year. But right now, his focus and the team's focus goes right to a young quarterback, that man right there, in TJ Lateef. He was an Elite 11 quarterback, much like Dylan, right? Premier quarterback coming out of high school here in Southern California. Goes there thinking you're going to sit for 2 years, develop, get to the keys to the car, gets thrust early in the second half into that game against SC in an insane environment. I mean, it was awesome in Lincoln, as you know, and we referenced earlier. So now, how do you navigate a performance where they weren't really moving the ball when he was at the quarterback position? And there were some unforced errors, whether it was tripping or, the last play, of course, on that fourth down that was talked about. I go to this, and I love what Matt Rule said about it. He said, I'm going to coach him like a vet. And that's what he said he did on Sunday. And I think that is a standard. I mean, quarterbacks now in high school, Mike, are developed at a greater rate than I think even in high school in the National Football League because they have to see so much. He saw so much at his school in Southern California. He was a gamer late in games and big games. So he has that muscle in him. Now it's about settling into the entirety of the process Sunday to kickoff. He's coming back home to Southern California. Part of that is great, because you're clearly driven to do that. But part of that has to be managed. And I go to Glenn Thomas, who's the co-offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, known Glenn for a long time, as respected as anybody in this profession. I think I'll have him dialed. They'll have to win the line of scrimmage. They're going to go up against a defense that struggled last time out against Indiana. But in the interim, you look at that 3-game winning streak, UCLA was putting it on people. So it will be a challenge at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern when they come down to face Nico Iamaleava coming off a bye week and a UCLA team that needs to win 3 to get to the postseason, which I know is a goal there. For them, when you look at who they have next, which is Ohio State, they got to get this one. So this is going to feel like, I know it's not a championship game, but it's going to feel like that because the sense of urgency for both of these teams are really high. And I can't wait to watch TJ play in this one. It's going to be a fun opportunity for him. We'll see how they call it in this air raid scheme. It's an attitude more than it is X's and O's. The attitude is you got to go for it. You got to be confident. I'd imagine that is the refrain all week long in practice.
Real quick before we leave this game, what do you expect from the Bruins and from Iamaleava? You mentioned their last game was brutal, but the stretch they had before was really compelling.
Oh, they're going to be just fine. Tim Skipper, to me, has put himself squarely in consideration for this head job and many others. I mean, he's been around for a while. He's really flipped this entire thing. Indiana, that got away from them extremely quickly. That is kind of the story, though. Look at every game against Indiana. I mean, you survive the first quarter, then before you know it, you're down 30. I mean, that's kind of what it has been for the most part against them the last 2 seasons. That was UCLA. They turned the ball over, didn't play with any efficiency, struggled in all facets of the game, giving up big plays, special teams, etc. They'll flip that switch. And I think for them, when you think about all of the, at least within the football world, the trauma they went through, right? Coaches fired, coordinators no longer there. They finally got to catch their breath. Talked to people on that staff last week, and everybody kind of needed it, including the members of the staff. They're trying to figure out life potentially after this season. So I think you'll see the most refreshed and focused team of the season coming to a game at home. The Rose Bowl isn't always sold out, but with Nebraska coming to town, like this is a game you circle here in LA. There's a buzz about this game. Part of it is going to be Nebraska. They travel so well. That's going to be great for UCLA. I think the environment's going to be one that'll be really fun on Saturday night. And they know what's at stake. I mean, everybody knows what's at stake at UCLA. I mean, if they can take a run here, look out. Like, they can regain some of that momentum of one of the best stories that have happened this year in college football after going through what they went through. I mean, look at the opposite side of it. Penn State hasn't had a win, since James Franklin was let go. UCLA went on a run. So I just say that for them. I think they'll be in a really good headspace heading into this game. And going up against a freshman quarterback on the road, back in his hometown, to me right now, that's advantage UCLA.
Yeah. Again, you can see that game at the Rose Bowl prime time over on Fox. If you're watching the Big Ten Network on Saturday, we got a doubleheader for you. Heisman contender Julian Sain and the #1 ranked Buckeyes take on Purdue. Then it's ranked Washington taking on Wisconsin. Those are our two games. And let's talk about that last one, Washington and Wisconsin. Man, Damon Williams, one of those guys you mentioned, it has that potential to really flash. He looked great last week against Illinois.
He looked great. Any other word you want to put in there? Like dominant, explosive. How do you defend him? I mean, all areas of the game, he was elite in. And then you add in Denzel Boston, Jonah Coleman. And I've been kind of on this train all year long. If you had to take 3 players on a team and ride with those 3 at quarterback, running back, and wideout, I think it's hard-pressed to not pick the 3 coming out of the Pacific Northwest and Jed Fish's team, especially the way they played against Illinois. Now they're well-rested. They got a stretch. They're in the conversation, as we referenced to kick off the show, for the college football playoff. Now they go to Madison, and I think people are sleeping on how hard this team at Wisconsin is playing. I get it that they've struggled, and I get that there's been a bunch of injuries. You turn on the film, Mike, and this team is leaving it on the grass every single weekend. I mean, they are playing so hard. You don't see loafs. You don't see lazy play. You see inconsistent play, especially at the quarterback position, and I get all that. They're going to have to score some points against this offense led by Damon Williams. But there's a world where this is going to be a heck of a game. And our crew takes a lot of pride in, like, bangers only. Like, only tight games is what we pretty much call every weekend. So there might be a little recipe here for an incredible weekend in Camp Randall. Let's just say, hopefully, third quarter, that crowd is jumping around, and we have an incredible final 15 minutes for you.
It's the opposite of an announcer jinx. It's an announcer guarantee. The game will be
there
close.
We go.
But your Damon Williams thing, I mean, I was looking it up today. I was surprised how good his numbers are. That last game was the 5th game this year. He's completed 75% of his passes or more.
Yeah, you know what's cool? Think about the quarterbacks we talked about for the Heisman, and now Damon Williams. They're all in their first year as full-time starters within their respective system. And I just felt like when this league expanded, the quarterback play was going to dramatically improve. And I think this year you're seeing that, right? The 6 teams in the CFP, 3 of them in Washington, USC, and Oregon have a first-year starting quarterback. You go to the other 3, and you kind of see the point here with Ohio State and what they're doing in Indiana. I mean, it's really dynamic at that position, and I think this league isn't going to slow down in that regard because, A, a lot of these quarterbacks are coming back, and then B, it's becoming a very attractive place, top to bottom, what this league is. I mean, look, you have a freshman at Michigan and what he's doing there. So overall, Bryce Underwood, like it is becoming an elite position at that position, or elite league at that position. And I think that is a tremendous thing for all of college football and, of course, all fans of the Big Ten.
Yeah, we had a feature a couple weeks ago about all the great quarterbacks play on the Slavko Tailgate show, and that was highlighting a lot. There were a lot of guys we could get to for sure. All right, I promised this earlier at the show. Yogi's going to give you full-fledged basketball breakdown. That is
my mom, that's when she was working in real estate, and she got Bobby Freeman, the guy she worked with, to try to teach me a trade just in case.
Right.
And it was going to be laying carpet. He spent like 3 hours teaching me how to do it, and I spent 3 days trying to figure out how to make this work, and it was just awful. I think to this day, if someone like put a roll of carpet and all the equipment, I would like get the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, you get hives. Yeah.
Now you're not going to want to miss Big Ten Trailblazers featuring Mark Cuban. Wednesday, 10 Eastern, 9 Central, 7 Pacific, right after the Indiana basketball season opener. 13 games, 13 wins for the Big Ten as the men's season opened up last night. Highlights include Fred Hoiberg getting his 200th career win for Nebraska, Minnesota Nico Medved and Maryland's Buzz Williams winning their first games as head coach. John Blackwell scored 31 for the Badgers. Michigan dropped a school record 69 points in the first half, and Illinois hit 6 million threes in their victory. We got a triple header coming your way tonight, including the #1 team in the land, Purdue. You can watch the Boilermakers, then the Hawkeyes, then the Oregon Ducks as our coverage begins 6:30 Eastern, 5:30 Central Time. By the way, on the women's side of things, some rank scores for you. The UCLA Bruins are going to be amazing this year. They won their first one easy. Maryland gave up 15 points total the last 3 quarters combined. And Iowa, Hannah Stuelke-Hohum, another 20.9 rebound performance. Before we go, we're glad to bring in Yogi Roth one more time for your stories from the road. This was a Halloween weekend for you. What's your takeaway, my man?
Well, number one, I came home after Halloween and I got to see you on social media. I'm still curious which piece of candy you decided to go with. I'm hoping it's Reese's. If it went Almond Joy, don't tell me, and we won't talk for 2 weeks. You'll be on suspension. But to that point, us going on the road, we went to Minnesota. We had a banger, as I referenced earlier. So number one, you got to follow Kyle Coughlin. Where are we going to go, man? What are we going to go to do? We get pizza, we get ice cream at Fletcher's, and it's Halloween weekend, and it's Guy Haberman's final game before he and his lovely wife, Alyssa, welcome a child into this world. It was unbelievable. The fellowship was an all-time. Our producer, Glenn, set it up, man. We showed pictures of all the kids in Halloween. It was just an incredible weekend in the Twin Cities, man. And then I came home to see your amazing tweet. How good was that?
Thank you. Yeah, the people like that. I'll tell you what the people don't love. You think Twitter can be divisive? Almond Joy is divisive. There's no middle ground. People love or hate it, and we clearly know where Yogi is. For Yogi Roth, I'm Mike Hall. Thanks for watching this edition of our show.